Welcome to part 4 of Jane Eyre, reimagined, as we continue the classic book and reimagine it in the style of best-selling author Margaret Atwood. If you enjoy this content, please take a minute to like, subscribe, or share this video. You can also hit the bell to be notified of new classic books reimagined as soon as they are published here on YouTube. If there is a classic book you would like to hear reimagined in the style of a modern author, please leave it in the comments.
Crossroads of Exile. 2 days have slipped away. It is a summer evening when the coachman leaves me at Whitcross. My fare could take me no farther, and I possess not a shilling more. The coach, now a mile away, is but a memory. I stand alone, realizing too late that my parcel remains in the coach pocket. Destitution wraps itself around me like a shroud. Whitcross is neither town nor hamlet. It is a solitary stone pillar, whitewashed and stark, where 4 roads intersect. The names of towns etched into its surface are distant, 10 miles at the nearest, 20 at the farthest. The landscape is a North Midland shire, shadowed by moorland and bordered by mountains. The roads stretch out, lonely and desolate, through the moor, fringed by wild heather. The solitude is profound, and I, an aimless wanderer, fear the questions of any passer-by. I turn away from the roads and step into the heath, a hollow furrowing the brown moorside my guide. Knee-deep in its dark growth, I follow its winding path until a moss-blackened granite crag offers shelter. High banks of moor rise around me. The crag shields my head. The sky looms overhead. For a time, anxiety gnaws at me, wild cattle, sportsmen, poachers. Each gust of wind or call of a bird sets my heart racing. But the deepening silence of evening soothes my nerves, and I begin to think, what is to be done? Where am I to go? These questions torment me. The path to human habitation is long, my limbs weary and trembling. Cold charity and reluctant sympathy are my only hopes, with repulse almost certain. I touch the heath, dry and warm from the summer day. The sky is clear, a star twinkling above the chasm ridge. Nature feels kind, benign. Tonight, at least, she will be my mother and my host. I eat the last of my bread, gathered bilberries to complement my meagre meal. My hunger, though not satisfied, is appeased. I say my evening prayers and choose my bed among the heather. The heather rises high around me, leaving only a narrow space for the night air. I fold my shawl for a coverlet, using a mossy swell as a pillow. My heart, sad and broken, trembles for Mr. Rochester. It bemoans his fate with bitter pity, longing for him ceaselessly. Worn out by this inner turmoil, I rise to my knees. Night has come, serene and safe, the stars a testament to God's presence. The Milky Way reminds me of his might and strength. My prayer turns to thanksgiving. Mr. Rochester is in God's hands. I nestle into the hill and fall asleep, forgetting my sorrow. The next day, hunger greets me, pale and bare. The birds have left their nests, the bees busy among the bilberries. The sun fills earth and sky. I wish I could live here, like the lizard or bee, finding sustenance and shelter. But I am human, and human needs drive me on. I rise, hopeless of the future, wishing death had claimed me in my sleep. At Whitcross, I choose a road leading away from the sun. I walk until fatigue demands rest. A church bell chimes. I turn towards the sound. Among the hills, a hamlet appears, a spire rising above pasture fields, cornfields, and wood. A stream zigzags through the valley, glistening in the sunlight. Human life and labour are near. I must struggle on. In the village, a little shop displays cakes of bread. I crave a cake but possess nothing to offer. I enter, ashamed to ask. The shopwoman, expecting a customer, grants me permission to sit. I ask if there is work in the village. She names farm labourers and factory workers, but no place for me. I leave, wandering through the hamlet, exhausted and hungry. A lane leads to a neat, blooming garden. I approach, hesitant but desperate. A young woman answers my knock. I ask for work. She shakes her head. The white door closes gently but firmly. I roam near houses, hoping for food. Hunger gnaws at me like a vulture. Afternoon turns to twilight. I find a bridle path, my strength failing. The rain falls heavily, despair grips me. Death seems near, yet I cling to life. In the misty landscape, I see a light. It burns steadily, neither receding nor advancing. My last hope, I drag myself towards it. The light leads me to a knoll, where a small house stands amidst trees. I reach a gate and push it open. The light comes from a small latticed window. I peer inside, seeing a warm kitchen and its occupants. 2 young women, dressed in mourning, sit by the hearth. An elderly woman knits by the table. The scene is silent and peaceful. I knock hesitantly. Hannah, the servant, answers. I ask to speak to her mistresses. She refuses, offering only a piece of bread. Desperate, I plead for shelter. She shuts the door. I collapse on the doorstep, weeping. A voice speaks close by, startling me. It is Mr. St. John, the lady's brother. He bids me rise and enter the house. Inside, I stand trembling, aware of my ghastly appearance. The sisters, Diana and Mary, and their brother regard me with concern. Diana offers me milk and bread. I eat slowly, feeling their sympathy. Mr. St. John asks my name and situation. I give an alias, Jane Eyre, and tell them I am a stranger. He decides to help me, despite my vague answers. Hannah leads me upstairs. I remove my wet clothes and lie in a warm, dry bed. Exhausted, I thank God and fall asleep. Chapter 29. The Labyrinth of Convalescence. Memory blurs and smudges the 3 days and nights that followed my arrival. My mind recalls sensations more than thoughts, an undulating sea of weakness and inertia. The bed beneath me becomes an extension of my body, as though extricating myself would require an act of violence. Time's flow remains unnoticed, morning melting into noon and then fading into evening. I perceive visitors, Hannah's frequent disquieting presence, Diana and Mary's gentle whispers, but cannot respond. Movement and speech are beyond me. I am a statue, an artifact of fatigue. Hannah's visits are disturbances, her demeanour a cold wind against my fevered skin. Her presence speaks of disapproval, suspicion, and a prejudice as stubborn as an ancient weed. Diana and Mary, conversing by my bedside, bring a different air. "It's fortunate we took her in," murmurs Diana. "Yes, she would have been found dead at the door by morning. What trials she must have faced," replies Mary, her voice tinged with wonder. "Strange hardships, I imagine. She's not uneducated, though. Her accent is pure, her clothes, though wet and worn, are fine. She has a peculiar face, yet I find it compelling. When in good health, she could be quite striking. Their compassion warms me, a silent balm against my isolation. No hint of regret, suspicion, or aversion taints their voices, and I am comforted. Mr. St. John visits but once, diagnosing my lethargy as the aftermath of profound exhaustion. His voice, low and unadorned, conveys certainty. Nature will heal her best if left alone. There is no disease, only overstrained nerves. Recovery will be swift once it begins. His assessment, though clinical, holds no hint of disdain. Diana responds, "To be honest, St. John, my heart warms to the poor soul. I hope we can help her permanently." "That is unlikely," he replies. "She's probably a young lady who's had a misunderstanding with her family. We might restore her to them, unless she's obstinate. There's a strength in her face that suggests otherwise." He studies me with a detached curiosity. "She's sensible, but not handsome." "She is ill, St. John." "Ill or well, she would always be plain. There's no harmony in her features." By the 3rd day, strength returns. By the 4th, I can move, speak, rise in bed. Hunger stirs, and I eat with renewed appetite. Hannah brings gruel and toast, both nourishing and free from the feverish taint that had plagued my meals. As I regain strength, a desire for action replaces my lethargy. Clean clothes await me, my black silk frock restored, shoes and stockings pristine. I dress slowly, resting often. My clothes hang loose on my emaciated frame, but I cover deficiencies with a shawl. Presentable, once more, I navigate the stone staircase, finding my way to the kitchen. The kitchen is warm, filled with the scent of baking bread. Hannah, softened by my recovery, offers a reluctant smile. "You're up then. You may sit in my chair by the hearthstone if you wish." I accept, and she watches me, curiosity mingling with lingering suspicion. As she removes loaves from the oven, she asks bluntly, "Did you ever go begging before you came here?" Indignation flares, but I suppress it. "I am not a beggar. I am no more a beggar than yourself or your young ladies." She seems puzzled. "You've no house, nor money, I guess." "The lack of a house and money does not make one a beggar in your sense of the word." "Are you book-learned?" she asks. "Yes, very." "Been to a boarding school?" "I was at a boarding school for 8 years." Her eyes widen. "Why can't you keep yourself, then?" "I have kept myself and shall do so again. What are you doing with those gooseberries?" "Making pies?" "Give them to me. I'll pick them." Reluctantly, she consents, even bringing a towel to protect my dress. "You're not used to servants' work, I see by your hands. Have you been a dressmaker?" "No. Never mind what I've been. Tell me about this house." "Some call it Marsh End. Others Moor House. Mr. St. John doesn't live here. He's staying temporarily. His parish is in Morton." "And what is he?" "A parson." "This was his father's house?" "Aye, and his grandfather's before him." "Mr. St. John Rivers, then?" "Aye, and his sisters, Diana and Mary Rivers." "They have no mother?" "Dead for many years. I've nursed all 3. "Then you must be an honest and faithful servant." Her surprise is evident. "I was mistaken about you. So many cheats go about, you must forgive me." "Let it. You wished to turn me away on a night when you wouldn't shut out a dog." "Well, it was hard. I thought more of the children than of myself. They've nobody but me to care for them." I remain silent, reflecting on her words. "You mustn't think too harshly of me," she says. "I do, but I forgive you. Shake hands." We shake hands, a smile softening her rough features. From that moment, we are friends. Hannah, it seems, loves to talk. As we work together, she recounts tales of the Rivers family, plain Mr. Rivers, a gentleman of ancient lineage, and the scholarly mistress whose children inherited her love of learning. Mr. St. John will be a parson. The girls plan to be governesses. They cherish their home and each other, united and harmonious. Having finished my task, I ask where the family is. "Gone for a walk, but they'll be back soon." When they return, Mr. St. John merely nods, but the sisters express their pleasure at seeing me up. Diana's voice is like a dove's coo, her eyes warm. Mary, though kind, is more reserved. Diana's authority and will resonate with me. I find pleasure in yielding to her gentle command. "And what business have you here?" Diana asks. "You belong in the parlour, not the kitchen." "I am fine here," I insist. "Nonsense," she says, leading me to the inner room. "Sit on the sofa while we prepare tea." I find myself alone with Mr. St. John. The parlour is small but clean, with old-fashioned furniture and a few antique portraits. Mr. St. John, engrossed in a book, appears almost statuesque. His face, classical and serene, belies an inner restlessness. His gaze, when it finally meets mine, is unflinchingly direct. "You're very hungry," he states. "I am, sir." "It's good you abstained for the last 3 days. Eat now, but not excessively." "I trust I shall not eat long at your expense," I reply awkwardly. "No, when you tell us where your friends are, you can return to them." "That is impossible. I have no home or friends." The 3 siblings look at me with curiosity, not suspicion. St. John's eyes are difficult to read, more instruments of scrutiny than revelation. "Do you mean to say you are completely isolated?" he asks. "Yes, not a tie links me to any living being." "A singular position at your age." He examines my hands. "You've never been married?" I am near 19 and not married. My embarrassment is palpable, and the sisters turn their eyes away, but St. John's gaze remains fixed until tears come. "Where did you last reside?" St. John, you're too inquisitive, Mary murmurs. The name of the place and person I lived with is my secret, I reply. You need help? Yes, and I seek it from some true philanthropist who will help me find work. I will help you to the extent of my power. What can you do? Refreshed by the tea, I address him steadily. Mr. Rivers, you and your sisters have saved my life. I will tell you what I can without compromising my safety or that of others. I am an orphan, educated at Lowood Orphan Asylum. I became a governess, but had to leave my position suddenly. I am destitute, but innocent of wrongdoing. Don't make her talk more now, St. John, Diana interjects. Come, Miss Elliot, rest on the sofa. I start at the name, forgetting my alias. St. John notices. Your name is Jane Elliot? Yes, though it's not my real name. I fear discovery. Quite right, says Diana. Let her rest, brother. St. John, however, persists. You wish to be independent? I do. Show me how to work, and I will leave. You shall stay, says Diana. We'll keep and cherish you like a lost bird. I will help you find work, says St. John, though my aid is humble. I'll be a dressmaker, a servant, anything honest, I assert. Right. I will aid you in my time and way. He resumes his book and I withdraw, having spoken and sat up as long as I could. Chapter 30. The Hidden Underworld. The more I learned about the inhabitants of Moor House, the more I found myself drawn into their web. My health improved, and soon I could sit up all day and even venture out. I joined Diana and Mary in their pursuits, engaging in conversations that flowed as naturally as the streams coursing through the moors. For the first time, I experienced the pleasure of complete intellectual and emotional harmony. Their sequestered home, with its low roof, latticed windows, and weathered walls, became a sanctuary. The ancient firs lining the avenue stood like sentinels against the mountain winds. The garden, shaded by yew and holly, bloomed only with the hardiest flowers, mirroring the resilience of its inhabitants. The purple moors and the hollow vale, with their wild pastures and moss-faced lambs, held a spellbinding charm. I understood their fervent attachment to this landscape, feeling its consecrated loneliness wrap around me like a protective cloak. Inside, our unity was equally profound. Diana and Mary, more accomplished and learned, generously shared their knowledge. I devoured their books, relishing our evening discussions. Our minds clicked together like puzzle pieces, each thought and opinion seamlessly aligning. Diana emerged as our leader, her physical vitality and vivacious spirit both mesmerizing and mysterious. I often found myself sitting at her feet, resting my head on her knee, content to listen as she and Mary delved into topics I could only skim. Diana taught me German, and I found joy in being her student, our mutual affection growing stronger. They discovered my talent for drawing, and soon I was teaching Mary, who proved an eager and diligent pupil. Time flowed like a gentle stream, days slipping into weeks unnoticed. Mr. St. John, however, remained an enigma. His frequent absences on pastoral duties and his reserved, brooding nature created a barrier between us. Rain or shine, he would venture out with his father's old pointer, Carlo, on missions of mercy that seemed as much a penance as a vocation. His sisters would sometimes implore him to stay, but he would merely smile, a smile more solemn than joyful, and question the sloth of letting weather deter his sacred duties. In the evenings, he would sit at the window, his chin resting on his hand, lost in turbulent thoughts. His eyes would flash and darken with an intensity that spoke of inner conflict. Unlike his sisters, he found no joy in the rugged beauty of the moors. He spoke once of their charm, but his tone held more gloom than delight. The peace of nature, which so enthralled Diana and Mary, seemed lost on him. It wasn't until I heard him preach in his church at Morton that I glimpsed the depths of his mind. His sermon began calmly, but soon his zeal, though restrained, grew powerful and forceful. His words, though meticulously controlled, lacked gentleness. touching on Calvinistic doctrines with a bitterness that seemed to reflect personal torment. The sermon left me feeling not uplifted, but deeply saddened, sensing that St. John, despite his purity and devotion, had not found the peace he preached. A month passed. Diana and Mary were soon to leave for their positions as governesses in a distant city. The thought of parting weighed heavily on all of us. St. John had yet to mention the employment he had promised to find for me. One morning, left alone with him in the parlour, I approached his desk, intending to ask about it. He looked up as I drew near. "You have a question?" he asked. "Yes. Have you found any service I can undertake?" "I found something for you 3 weeks ago," he replied, "but you seemed useful and happy here, so I delayed. Now that my sisters are leaving, it's time." "And they leave in 3 days?" "Yes, and I will return to the parsonage at Morton. Hannah will accompany me, and this house will be shut up." He fell silent, lost in thought. I waited, then pressed on. "What is the employment you had in mind?" "It is not a lucrative position, nor one of high status," he said after a pause. "I am poor, and my remaining patrimony is this crumbling grange and a patch of moorland. The job I offer is simple but meaningful, teaching at a school for poor girls in Morton." He described the position, a modest salary, a small furnished cottage, and the task of educating cottagers' children. It was humble but independent, and I accepted it gratefully. He seemed surprised by my willingness, but pleased. "You understand it is a village school," he said. "Your students will be poor girls and the curriculum basic." "I understand," I replied. "When will you start?" "I can go tomorrow and open the school next week." He smiled, a genuine, satisfied smile. "Very well." He then studied my face as if reading a book. "You will not stay at Morton long," he said. "I see a restlessness in your eyes." "I'm not ambitious," I countered. "Ambition isn't the only thing that drives people away," he replied. "You have strong emotions and sympathies. I doubt you can be content with a solitary, monotonous life for long. But for now, you have a place." He left the room, and I pondered his words. Despite his reserved exterior, he revealed more in that brief conversation than in the entire previous month. As the day of departure approached, Diana and Mary became more subdued. Diana spoke of her brother's unyielding resolve with a mix of admiration and sorrow. "He hides a fever in his vitals," she said. "He seems gentle, but can be inexorable. His decisions, though right and noble, break my heart." An unexpected event added to their distress. St. John received a letter bearing news of their Uncle John's death. The sisters were momentarily struck, not by grief, but by the weight of what might have been. Their uncle had left his fortune to another, leaving them with only a token sum. "We are now without father, soon without home and brother," Mary murmured. The next day I left for Morton. Diana and Mary departed for their new lives, and Mr. Rivers and Hannah moved to the parsonage, leaving the old house deserted. Chapter 31. The Cottage Chronicles. At last I found myself in a place I could call home, a humble cottage with whitewashed walls and a sanded floor. It contained the bare necessities: 4 painted chairs, a table, a clock, a cupboard with a few plates and dishes, and a set of tea things in delf. Above, a small chamber mirrored the simplicity of the kitchen below, its deal bedstead and chest of drawers almost mocking my scanty wardrobe. Yet, the kindness of my friends had increased it with a modest stock of essentials, a gesture of generosity that tugged at my heartstrings. Evening had settled, and I dismissed the little orphan who served as my handmaid with the fee of an orange. Alone on the hearth, the silence of the cottage pressed against me, a tangible weight that mirrored my inner solitude. The fire's flicker cast long shadows, dancing spectres that seemed to whisper of the past and the uncertain future. This morning the village school opened with 20 scholars. Only 3 could read, and none could write or cipher. They spoke in the broadest accent of the district, making our mutual understanding a struggle. Some were rough and intractable, but others showed promise and a desire to learn. I reminded myself that these coarsely clad peasants had hearts and minds as capable of excellence as any child of noble birth. My duty was to nurture these seeds of potential. Yet, as I sat in the bare schoolroom, the desolation crept in. Was I content? No. I felt degraded, doubting that this step had raised me in society. The ignorance and poverty around me were disheartening. The walls seemed to close in, the air thick with the scent of old wood and damp earth, a constant reminder of my fall from grace. But I knew these feelings were wrong and strove to overcome them. Perhaps in time, the progress and improvement of my students would bring satisfaction instead of disgust. As I questioned my path, I compared it to the alternative I had fled. Would it have been better to succumb to temptation, to live as Mr. Rochester's mistress in a luxurious villa in France, loved deliriously for a time? He loved me deeply. I would never be so adored again. Yet the thought of living in a fool's paradise, fevered with delusive bliss, then suffocating with shame and remorse, repelled me. Better to be a village schoolmistress, free and honest, in the healthy heart of England. I thanked Providence for guiding me to this choice. As my musings concluded, I stepped to the door, looking out at the harvest sunset over the quiet fields. The birds were singing their last strains. The air was mild, the dew balm. The sky blazed with hues of gold and crimson, a stark contrast to the grey monotony of my daily existence. I felt a surprising sense of happiness, but soon found myself weeping for the loss of my bond with Mr. Rochester and the fear that my departure had driven him from the path of right. The tears fell unbidden, a silent acknowledgement of the pain I carried within, the wound that refused to heal. Turning from the sky, I leaned against the stone frame of my door. A slight noise made me look up. St. John Rivers stood at the garden gate with his old pointer, Carlo. His brow was knit and his gaze grave. I invited him in, but he declined, handing me a parcel from his sisters, a welcome gift of a color box, pencils, and paper. He scrutinized my tear-streaked face. "Have you found your first day's work harder than expected?" "No, I think I shall manage well in time." "Perhaps your accommodations have disappointed you?" "No, my cottage is clean and weatherproof, my furniture sufficient. 5 weeks ago I was an outcast. Now I have a home, a business. I do not repine." "But you feel solitude and oppression?" "I have hardly had time to feel lonely." "Very well. Resist the temptation to look back. Pursue your present path for some months at least." "I will," I answered. St. John continued, "Controlling inclination is hard, but possible. When our energies demand sustenance they cannot get, we must seek new nourishment. I was miserable in the ministry, craving the active life of an artist or author. After a struggle, I found my calling as a missionary. Now, my path is clear and my faculties unfettered." His words resonated as we both looked at the setting sun. Suddenly, a sweet voice called out, "Good evening, Mr. Rivers, and good evening, Carlo." Miss Oliver had arrived, her form pure and graceful. She was beauty incarnate, with features that could only be described as perfect. What did St. John think of this earthly angel? I watched his reaction closely. He turned with deliberation. "A lovely evening, but late for you to be out alone." "I just came from town," she replied. "Papa told me about the new schoolmistress. This is she?" She pointed to me. "Yes," he answered. "Do you think you will like Morton?" she asked me with charming simplicity. "I hope so. Do you like your house?" "Very much." "Have I furnished it nicely?" "Very nicely indeed." "And Alice Wood is a good attendant?" "She is." Miss Oliver's lively chatter seemed to unsettle St. John. His expression grew stern as she spoke of her gaiety and social engagements. She invited him to visit her father, but he declined with a tone of reluctance. As she bid him good evening, he barely touched her hand, his voice hollow. This glimpse into St. John's inner turmoil shifted my thoughts from my own woes. Diana had called her brother inexorable as death, and she was right. Miss Oliver's presence was like a beam of sunlight in the dusk, her laughter like a melody that lingered in the air. St. John's stern composure seemed to falter in her presence, a battle between duty and desire playing out in his eyes. She invited him to visit her father again, her voice tinged with genuine concern. But he remained resolute, declining with a firmness that masked the struggle within. As she turned to leave, her steps light and graceful, St. John's gaze followed her with an intensity that spoke volumes. His lips pressed into a thin line, as if holding back words he dared not speak. When she disappeared from view, the silence that settled was heavy, laden with unspoken emotions and suppressed longing. "Good evening," he repeated to the empty space where she had stood, his voice echoing with a hollowness that resonated in the quiet evening. He turned to leave, his shoulders squared with determination, but his steps were slower, as if burdened by the weight of his own resolve. As he walked away, the scene of their interaction played over in my mind. St. John, the paragon of duty and discipline, caught in the web of his own emotions, a prisoner to his principles. It was a poignant reminder that even the strongest wills are not impervious to the pangs of the heart. My thoughts shifted from my own struggles to his. Here was a man, steadfast in his purpose, yet haunted by the very desires he sought to suppress. Diana's words echoed in my mind, inexorable as death. She had not exaggerated. St. John Rivers was a man driven by a relentless pursuit of duty, willing to sacrifice personal happiness on the altar of his mission. As the evening deepened and the stars began to dot the sky, I returned to my cottage. The quietude of the night wrapped around me, a stark contrast to the turmoil within. I sat by the hearth, the flickering flames casting shadows that danced with the rhythm of my thoughts. St. John's visit had stirred something within me, a recognition of the struggles we both faced. His battle was with the rigidity of his duty, mine with the ghosts of my past and the uncertainty of my future. In this quiet, lonely place, we were both searching for a path, a way to reconcile our desires with our responsibilities. As I prepared for bed, I felt a renewed sense of determination. The road ahead was uncertain, fraught with challenges and sacrifices, but it was mine to walk. The solitude of the cottage, the simplicity of my new life, offered a space to heal and grow. And perhaps, in this quiet corner of the world, I would find not only peace, but a strength I had not known before. With this thought, I lay down, the events of the day fading into the quiet hum of the night. The future was a vast, unknown expanse, but for now, I was here, in this moment, finding my way, one step at a time. Chapter 32. In the Crucible of the Everyday. I threw myself into the work of the village school with a fervour that bordered on desperation. Teaching these children was laborious, a Sisyphean task in a world that seemed to have forgotten them. Their minds, untouched by formal education, were sluggish, their potential hidden beneath layers of indifference and neglect. At first, they appeared uniformly dull, like unpolished stones. Yet, as I persisted, the rough surfaces began to reveal facets of sharp wit, innate politeness, and a surprising eagerness to learn. The early days were challenging, their broad accents a barrier, their untamed behavior a constant trial. But slowly, I broke through. Some of these seemingly unremarkable children began to show remarkable progress. Their transformation was a balm to my spirit, each small victory a testament to human resilience and the power of education. My heart swelled with pride as their rough manners softened, their curiosity blossomed, and their hands grew steady with the needle and the pen. Among them were the daughters of farmers, young women already versed in reading, writing, and sewing. To these I introduced grammar, geography, history, and the finer arts of needlework. These evenings spent in their homes were some of my most cherished times, The farmers and their wives, grateful for my efforts, showered me with kindness. Their simple hospitality was a soothing contrast to the isolation of my cottage, a warmth that elevated them in their own eyes and made them strive to deserve the respect I showed them. In this modest rural community, I found a place of quiet affection and mutual respect. The villagers greeted me with smiles and salutations, their genuine regard a comforting embrace. Living amidst their goodwill was like basking in the gentle warmth of a perpetual spring. My days were filled with the steady rhythm of teaching and learning, a routine that anchored me and kept darker thoughts at bay. Yet, as night fell, my dreams betrayed the calm of my waking hours. They were vivid and tumultuous, filled with scenes of adventure and peril. In these nocturnal wanderings, I often encountered Mr. Rochester, our meetings charged with unspoken emotion and unresolved longing. The intensity of these dreams left me trembling, the vividness of his imagined presence a cruel reminder of my solitary reality. Each morning I would rise from my curtainless bed, shaken but resolute, ready to face the day with renewed determination. Rosamond Oliver was a frequent visitor at the school. She would arrive on her pony, accompanied by a liveried servant, her presence a splash of colour and elegance in our humble setting. Her beauty was almost otherworldly, a vision in her riding habit, her hair cascading in golden curls. The children would gaze at her in awe, and I could see the effect she had on St. John Rivers. Though he tried to mask his feelings, his stern features softened, his eyes betrayed a suppressed fervour. Rosamond knew her power over him. She would speak to him with a playful familiarity, her voice a melody that made his stoic facade falter. His hand would tremble, his eyes burn with a fire he struggled to contain, yet he remained resolute, his heart already promised to a higher calling. I watched this silent drama unfold with a mixture of empathy and frustration, knowing that he denied himself a happiness that was within reach. Miss Oliver's visits to my cottage were another delight. She was curious, rummaging through my belongings with childlike enthusiasm. One evening, she discovered my drawing materials and some sketches. Her delight was infectious as she marvelled at my talent and insisted I draw her portrait. As she sat, radiant in her beauty, I felt a thrill of artistic joy, eager to capture her essence on paper. Her father, Mr. Oliver, soon followed, a taciturn man of imposing presence. He was kind and approving of my efforts at the school, expressing admiration that felt genuine and encouraging. His approval of St. John as a suitor for his daughter was clear, viewing the young clergyman's noble lineage and sacred vocation as worthy compensation for his lack of fortune. One afternoon, while translating a few pages of German, I heard a knock at my door. It was St. John, come to see how I was spending my holiday. He brought me a book, a new poem, a gift of solace for the evening. As I glanced through the pages, he noticed the portrait of Rosamond on my table. His reaction was immediate, a silent struggle playing out on his face. "Is this portrait like?" I asked, determined to draw him out. "Like whom?" he replied, feigning ignorance. "Miss Oliver, of course," I said, placing the picture in his hands. He studied it, his features softening. "It is well done," he admitted, his voice low. "The resemblance is striking." I pressed on, offering to paint him a duplicate. His desire for it was clear, though he wrestled with the wisdom of accepting such a memento. I could see his inner turmoil, the conflict between his duty and his longing. "You should marry her," I said bluntly. "She likes you, and her father would approve." He shook his head, struggling to articulate his thoughts. "I love her," he confessed, "but I cannot bind myself to her. My path lies elsewhere." "But why not?" I challenged. "You are throwing away your happiness." "My vocation is my life," he said firmly. "I cannot abandon it, not even for her." We stood in silence, the weight of his decision hanging between us. I knew he was right, yet it pained me to see him deny himself so much. He left soon after, taking the portrait with him, a silent testament to his unspoken love. As the days passed, I continued my work at the school, the routine a comfort. Rosamond's visits became less frequent as winter set in. Her presence missed, but not forgotten. St. John remained distant, his focus on his missionary preparations, a stark contrast to the warmth of the village life around him. One evening, as I sat by the fire, a thought struck me. Despite the challenges, despite the heartache and the sacrifices, there was a strange beauty in our lives. We were all striving for something greater, something beyond ourselves, whether it was the education of a village child, the pursuit of artistic excellence, or the spread of a noble faith. We were all part of a larger tapestry, our individual threads woven into a complex and intricate design. In this realization, I found a new sense of peace. The struggles and sacrifices were not in vain. They were part of our journey, the path to a deeper understanding of ourselves and our place in the world. And in this knowledge, I found a quiet strength, a resolve to continue, to persevere, and to embrace the beauty and the pain of this extraordinary life. Chapter 33. Whispers in the Snow. When Mr. St. John left, the world outside my window had already turned into a swirling tempest of white. The snowstorm raged through the night, its howling fury muffled only by the thick walls of my cottage. By dawn, the valley lay buried beneath drifts that rendered it nearly impassable. I shuttered my windows, laid a mat against the door to keep the snow from creeping in, and trimmed the fire. The howling storm outside was a stark contrast to the calm within. I lit a candle and took down Marmion, losing myself in the cadence of its verses. Dayset on Norham's castled steep, and Tweed's fair river broad and deep, and Cheviot's mountains lone, the massive towers, the donjon keep, the flanking walls that round them sweep, in yellow lustre shone. Just as the tempest outside began to fade from my mind, a sudden noise jolted me. The wind, I thought. But no, it was St. John Rivers, standing in the doorway, his cloak white as a glacier. His sudden appearance was a shock. I had not expected any visitor in such weather. "Any ill news?" I asked, my voice tinged with anxiety. "Has anything happened?" "No, nothing of the sort," he replied, removing his cloak and hanging it up. He pushed the mat back into place and stamped the snow from his boots. I needed a break from the solitude of my books and empty rooms, and I must admit I'm eager to hear the rest of a certain story. He seated himself by the fire. His presence, usually so composed, now seemed tinged with an air of urgency. His face, illuminated by the firelight, revealed hollows of care and sorrow. "I wish Diana or Mary would come and stay with you," I said impulsively. "You shouldn't be alone so much, and you're so reckless with your health." "There's nothing wrong with me," he replied with a detached indifference, his eyes fixed on the fire. Seeing his abstraction, I tried to steer the conversation to lighter topics, but he remained unresponsive. Eventually, he stirred, taking out a pocketbook and reading a letter in silence. His continued silence was oppressive. "Have you heard from Diana and Mary lately?" I ventured. "Not since the letter I showed you a week ago. Any changes in your plans? Will you be leaving England sooner than expected?" "I fear not. Such luck is too good to hope for." Baffled by his reticence, I turned to the school and my scholars, trying to engage him. "Mary Garrett's mother is better, and Mary came back to school this morning. I'll have 4 new girls next week from Foundry Close, if the snow lets up." "Indeed." "Mr. Oliver is paying for 2. "He is." "He plans a treat for the whole school at Christmas." "Yes, I know." "It was Miss Oliver's idea, wasn't it?" "Most likely." Silence fell again, more oppressive than before. The clock struck 8, and he turned to me with an unexpected request. "Put your book aside and come closer to the fire." Wondering at his sudden shift, I complied. "Half an hour ago, I mentioned my impatience to hear a tale's sequel," he began. "On reflection, I think it's better if I tell you the story myself." He leaned forward, his voice low but clear, the firelight casting shadows on his face. 20 years ago, a poor curate fell in love with a rich man's daughter. They married against her family's wishes, and were disowned. Within 2 years, both died, leaving behind a daughter. This child, taken in by her rich relations, was raised by Mrs. Reed of Gateshead. This girl, like you, was sent to Lowood School. From there she became a governess for Mr. Rochester. My heart pounded. "Mr. Rivers," I interrupted. "Bear with me," he said, his tone calming but firm. "At the altar, she discovered Mr. Rochester had a living wife. She fled Thornfield Hall, disappearing without a trace. Advertisements seeking her went unanswered until a letter reached me from Mr. Briggs, a solicitor. It appears this governess is of urgent importance. Odd tale, isn't it?" "Tell me about Mr. Rochester," I demanded. "What of him? Where is he?" "I know nothing of his current state. The letter mentioned only his fraudulent attempt at marriage. But you should be asking about the governess and why she's needed." "Did no one go to Thornfield? What about Mr. Rochester?" "The letters were addressed to him, but the replies came from a lady, Alice Fairfax." My heart sank. I imagined Mr. Rochester lost, perhaps abroad, in despair. "He must have been a bad man," St. John remarked. "You don't know him," I retorted. "Don't judge him." "Very well," he said quietly. "Let's finish the tale. The name of the governess is Jane Eyre. Recognize it?" I nodded, feeling a cold dread. "Mr. Briggs sought you because your uncle, Mr. Eyre of Madeira, left you his fortune. You are now rich." "Rich?" I echoed, disbelieving. "Yes, an heiress." Silence fell as I absorbed the news. My uncle, whom I'd hoped to meet, was dead, and with him any chance of knowing my only living relative. Yet I was now independent, no longer a beggar or a vagrant. The realization was overwhelming. "You must prove your identity," St. John continued. "Your fortune is secure, awaiting your claim." The implications of wealth, the sudden shift from poverty, was immense. Yet the news brought a somber weight, tempered by the loss of an uncle I never knew. "You unbend your forehead at last," St. John observed. "How much are you worth?" "How much?" I asked numbly. £20,000. I gasped. I had imagined a modest sum, but £20,000 was beyond my wildest dreams. St. John laughed, a rare sound from him. "It is a large sum," I managed. "There must be a mistake." "No mistake," he assured. "The will is clear." As he prepared to leave, I felt a sudden resolve. "Stop a moment!" He paused, curiosity in his eyes. "Why did Mr. Briggs write to you?" "I'm a clergyman. We often get such odd requests." "No, there's more to it," I insisted. "Tell me the truth." He hesitated, then sighed. "Very well. My mother's name was Eyre. You and I are cousins." The revelation struck me like a bolt of lightning. My isolation shattered, replaced by the warmth of newfound family. The two women I admired and the man who had saved me were my kin. Joy surged through me. "Oh, I am glad," I exclaimed. St. John smiled. "You were serious about the fortune, but now you are excited about this." "It's not just money," I said. "I have family now, real family." I walked the room, emotions overwhelming me. I wanted to share my newfound wealth with my cousins, to free them from their burdens. "Write to Diana and Mary," I urged. "Tell them to come home. We will divide the fortune." "You must take time to consider," St. John cautioned. "My mind is made up. I want to share it with you." "You are impulsive but sincere," he acknowledged. "Let's agree on this." We shook hands, and he left. The struggles to settle the legacy were long and arduous, but my resolve never wavered. With the help of Mr. Oliver and a lawyer, the fortune was divided equally. We each gained a substantial sum, enough to secure our futures and strengthen our bond as family. In the end, the wealth brought not just financial stability, but the deeper riches of connection and belonging, the true treasures of life. Chapter 34. The Echoes of Winter. The settling of all matters was as inevitable as the falling of the first snow of winter. and by the time the season of festivity approached, the school at Morton was closed. The weight of good fortune had not only opened my hand but also my heart. Giving when one has received so much is merely an outlet for the overflow of joy. My rustic scholars had grown fond of me, and our parting was heartfelt. Their innocent affection confirmed my place in their lives, and I promised to visit them weekly to continue their education. As the final bell rang and the girls filed out, Mr. Rivers appeared. His presence was as crisp as the winter air, his eyes as piercing as the cold wind. "Do you consider you have received your reward for your efforts?" he asked as I locked the door. "Does the sense of having done good bring you pleasure?" "Doubtless," I replied. "And yet you have only toiled a few months. Imagine a lifetime devoted to the task of uplifting your race." "Yes," I agreed, "but I could not go on forever. I need to enjoy my own faculties too. I am ready for a holiday." His brow furrowed, reflecting the clouds gathering outside. "What sudden eagerness is this? What are you planning?" "To be active, and first I need Hannah's help to prepare Moor House for Diana and Mary's return." He looked relieved. "Very well. Hannah shall go with you." "Thank you. Here is the schoolroom key, and I'll give you the cottage key tomorrow." He took it, eyeing me curiously. "You seem very light-hearted. What new aim or ambition do you have?" "My first aim is to clean Moor House from top to bottom. Next, I'll polish everything until it shines. Then I'll arrange every piece of furniture with precision, keep fires burning in every room, and prepare for the arrival of your sisters with a grand welcome." St. John smiled slightly, but remained unsatisfied. "It's all very well for now, but I hope you will soon look beyond domestic joys." "The best things in life," I interrupted. "No, Jane, this world is not for fulfillment. You must not become idle." "I intend to stay busy," I insisted. "Jane, I give you 2 months to enjoy your new situation, but then I hope your energies will seek a higher purpose." "St. John," I said, "I am content. Why do you stir me to restlessness?" "To ensure you use your talents for God's purpose," he replied. "I will watch you closely. Do not waste your fervour on transient joys." "Yes, just as if you were speaking Greek," I muttered. "I will be happy, and you cannot prevent it. Goodbye." Happy I was, and hard I worked. Hannah and I transformed the house, invoking order from chaos. I purchased new furniture, and with the carte blanche given by my cousins, made improvements without losing the home's comforting familiarity. When everything was in place, Moor House was a haven of bright modesty amidst the wintry desolation outside. The awaited Thursday arrived. Fires burned warmly, the kitchen was immaculate, and we were dressed and ready. St. John arrived first, finding me in the kitchen. "Are you satisfied with housemaid's work?" he asked. "Come see for yourself," I replied, leading him on a tour. He observed the changes without expressing pleasure, dampening my spirits. His silence indicated he valued old associations. "Not at all," he assured me. "You have respected every association, but perhaps you have thought too much about it." He took a book and withdrew to his usual window seat, leaving me feeling cold. St. John was a good man, but his heart was hard and cold. The comforts of life held no appeal for him. "St. John," I thought, "you are a man for great causes, but not for the fireside. A missionary's life suits you better." "They are coming!" Hannah cried. I ran out, lantern in hand. Mary and Diana emerged from the carriage, and we embraced amidst laughter and joy. Inside, they admired the changes and expressed their gratitude, their faces glowing with happiness. That evening, our joy contrasted with St. John's reserve. He was glad to see his sisters, but could not share in their exuberance. Around an hour after tea, a rap came at the door. A boy had come to fetch St. John to see his dying mother. Despite the late hour and the bitter weather, he left without complaint, returning near midnight, tired but content. Christmas week was a merry time. Diana and Mary's spirits were high, their chatter filling the house with life. St. John escaped our gaiety, busy with his parish duties. One morning, Diana asked about his plans. Unchanged and unchangeable, he replied, informing us of his imminent departure for India. And Rosamond Oliver? Mary inquired. She is to marry Mr. Granby, he said calmly. His sisters and I exchanged glances. The match was sudden, but St. John showed no emotion. The first time I found him alone, I considered asking if he was distressed, but his reserved demeanour discouraged me. His detachment grew, making me feel the distance between us greater than ever. One afternoon, as I sat struggling with my studies, St. John called me to his side. My voice failed, and I burst into tears. He waited patiently for me to compose myself. "Jane, what are you doing?" "Learning German." "I want you to learn Hindustani. You are not in earnest?" "I am. It will help me, and you are the best pupil for it." St. John was not easily refused. I consented, and he became a demanding but patient teacher. His influence over me grew, stifling my natural vivacity. One evening, Diana, in a playful mood, urged him to kiss me goodnight as he did her and Mary. He complied, but his kiss was cold and experimental, a seal to my growing sense of confinement. Daily, I felt more compelled to please him, though it meant suppressing my true self. His approval was a burden, and I wished for the freedom of neglect. Meanwhile, Mr. Rochester's memory haunted me. My inquiries to Mr. Briggs and Mrs. Fairfax yielded no news. Hope faded, leaving me in dark despair. Spring's beauty brought no joy, and St. John's insistence on my lessons in Hindustani grew more urgent. One day, after a bitter disappointment, I broke down in tears during our lesson. "We will wait until you are more composed," he said patiently. After regaining my composure, St. John suggested a walk. I complied, knowing rebellion was futile. We walked to Marsh Glen, where he finally spoke. "Jane, I go in 6 weeks." "God will protect you," I replied. "Yes, I am his servant, and I long for others to join me in his work." "All do not have your powers," I said. "I address only those worthy of the work," he insisted. A strange feeling overcame me as he spoke. "And what does your heart say?" he asked. "My heart is mute," I replied, trembling. "Then I must speak for it. Jane, come with me to India as my wife." The ground seemed to shift beneath me. "Oh, St. John, have mercy!" He continued, relentless. "You are formed for labour, not love. You must be my wife for the sake of our mission." "I'm not fit for it," I protested. He had anticipated this. "Humility, Jane. Trust in God's strength. Lean on the Rock of Ages." "I don't understand a missionary's life." "I will guide you. Trust in me." I felt trapped, my mind a dungeon. "I can't marry you," I said finally. "Not as your wife." He looked at me, unyielding. "It must be marriage, or nothing." "I see we do not love each other as we should," I insisted. "Let us remain as we are." "We cannot. I need a wife, not a sister." "I will give you my energies, but not myself," I said firmly. He was silent, his gaze stern. "Think, Jane. It is God's will." "Oh, I will give my heart to God," I said. "You do not want it." His response was immediate and stern. "Jane, do not jest with sacred matters. This is a solemn decision, one that must not be taken lightly. You say you will give your heart to God, but I need your entire being for this mission. Half an offering will not suffice." His words hung in the air, heavy and oppressive. The fire crackled in the hearth, a small reminder of warmth and life, but it felt distant. I looked at him, his features carved in stone, his eyes a steel-blue gaze that seemed to pierce through my very soul. I knew that to join him would mean abandoning my true self, suppressing my passions and desires, turning my life into a hollow shell dedicated solely to his purpose. "St. John," I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside me, "I cannot marry you. I will go to India as your fellow missionary, but not as your wife. The sacrifice you ask of me is too great." He shook his head, a look of deep disappointment crossing his face. "Jane, you are mistaken. It must be as my wife or not at all. Practical obstacles demand this union. Consider it carefully. I did consider it, but my heart and mind rebelled against the idea. St. John, we do not love each other as a husband and wife should. This marriage would be a facade, an empty union without the foundation of genuine affection. You are not being practical, Jane. Love is not the most important factor here. The mission, the work, that is what matters. I understand the importance of the mission, I said, feeling a surge of frustration. But I also understand the importance of staying true to oneself. I cannot betray my own heart and spirit for a cause, no matter how noble. He looked at me, his expression inscrutable. You will have time to reconsider. I leave for Cambridge tomorrow and will be gone for a fortnight. Use that time to reflect on what I have said. With that, he turned and walked away, leaving me standing by the hearth, the warmth of the fire a stark contrast to the coldness of our exchange. The house seemed to echo with silence as I pondered his words. The idea of marriage to St. John felt like a death sentence, a life of suppression and duty without love or joy. That night, after he had kissed his sisters good night, he merely nodded to me and left the room. I felt a sting of rejection, but also a sense of relief. I had stood my ground, and though it pained me to disappoint him, I knew I had made the right choice. Diana noticed my distress and said, "Jane, you and St. John have had a disagreement, haven't you? Go after him, make it right." I hesitated, but then followed her advice, finding him at the foot of the stairs. "Good night, St. John," I said softly. "Good night, Jane," he replied, his tone cool. "Shake hands?" I offered, holding out my hand. He took it, his grip cold and loose. "I do not hold grudges, Jane. There is nothing to forgive." I nodded, feeling a mix of sadness and resolve. "Thank you, St. John." He turned and walked away, and I watched him go, knowing that our paths were diverging. I had chosen my own way, one that did not involve a loveless marriage or a life of suppressed desires. I would find my own mission, one that allowed me to be true to myself. The days that followed were filled with a sense of liberation. I continued my work at Moor House, preparing for Diana and Mary's return, and embracing the simple joys of domestic life. St. John's absence was a relief, giving me space to breathe and reflect. When Diana and Mary arrived, the house was filled with laughter and warmth. We spent the evenings by the fire, sharing stories and plans for the future. St. John's stern presence was missed, but not his oppressive influence. As I settled into this new life, I felt a growing sense of peace. The shadows of the past began to fade, replaced by the light of new possibilities. I knew that the journey ahead would not be easy, but it would be my own, guided by my heart and spirit. And so, I embraced the winter of change, finding strength in the cold and clarity in the storm. The echoes of the past whispered their lessons, and I listened, ready to forge my own path in the world. Chapter 35. The Marble Man and the Merciless Moon. He did not leave for Cambridge the next day, as he had promised. He postponed his departure for a whole week, and in that time he orchestrated a silent symphony of punishment that only a devout, yet relentless man could devise. Each day, without a single word of reproach, without a single overt act of hostility, he made me acutely aware that I had been exiled from the realm of his favour. St. John did not harbour vindictiveness. His nature was above such pettiness. He had forgiven me for spurning him and his love, yet he had not forgotten. His eyes, always fixed on some distant horizon, bore an inscription of my rejection. Every interaction with him was tainted by that memory. Each word he spoke to me carried an echo of my scorn. We continued our morning routines, seated side by side at his desk, but the atmosphere had thickened into a glacial silence. His demeanour was unchanged outwardly, yet every gesture, every word, was infused with a deliberate indifference that cut deeper than any insult. He had become an automaton, flesh turned to marble, eyes cold and gem-like, his voice a mechanical instrument devoid of warmth. This was torture of the most refined kind, a slow, smouldering fire of indignation and grief. I felt as though he could kill me without shedding a drop of my blood, without staining his crystal conscience. My attempts to reconcile, to melt his icy demeanour, were met with a stony indifference. Tears fell unchecked, yet they had no more effect on him than rain on a statue. To his sisters he was kinder than usual, adding the cruelty of contrast to his silent repudiation of me. The night before his departure, I saw him in the garden, bathed in the blood-red light of sunset. A man who had once saved my life now seemed a distant stranger. Driven by a desperate hope, I approached him. "St. John, I am unhappy because you are still angry with me. Let us be friends." "I hope we are friends," he replied, still watching the rising moon with detached interest. "No, St. John, we are not friends as we were. You know that." "Are we not? That is wrong. For my part, I wish you no ill and all good." "I believe you, St. John, but as your kinswoman, I desire more than this cold charity." "Of course," he said, "your wish is reasonable, and I am far from regarding you as a stranger." His words, spoken in that infuriatingly calm tone, were more wounding than any overt rejection, yet I valued his friendship too much to give up so easily. "Must we part this way, St. John? When you go to India, will you leave me without a kinder word?" He turned to face me fully, the moonlight casting sharp shadows on his face. "When I go to India, Jane, will I leave you?" "What? Do you not go to India?" "You said I could not unless I married you." "And you will not marry me? You adhere to that resolution?" The chill of his words was like an avalanche poised to crash. "No, St. John, I will not marry you. I adhere to my resolution." His face paled, the only sign of the turmoil within. "Your words are violent, unfeminine, and untrue. They reveal a state of mind that requires severe reproof." I had etched a deeper scar in his memory, one that would never heal. "Now you will indeed hate me," I said. "It is useless to try to conciliate you." A flicker of pain crossed his otherwise impassive face. His lips quivered briefly. "You utterly misinterpret my words," I said, taking his hand. "I do not wish to grieve or pain you." He withdrew his hand sharply. "And now you recall your promise, and will not go to India at all, I presume?" "I will go as your assistant," I answered. He paused, the struggle between his rigid principles and natural inclinations evident. "A single woman of your age proposing to accompany a single man of mine is absurd. I regret you mentioned it." "Keep to common sense, St. John. You cannot misunderstand my meaning. I will be your curate, but never your wife." His calm facade cracked slightly. "A female curate who is not my wife would never suit me." "I will find out what has become of Mr. Rochester," I said, finally revealing my heart's desire. "It remains for me to remember you in my prayers," he said. "I had thought I recognized in you one of the chosen. But God sees not as man sees. His will be done." He opened the gate and walked away, leaving me standing in the pale light of the rising moon. Inside, Diana, ever perceptive, noticed my agitation. "Jane, you are always pale now. What is going on with St. John and you?" "St. John cherishes peculiar views regarding me," I said. "He has asked me to marry him." "And you will marry him, Jane, won't you?" Diana exclaimed. "Then he will stay in England." "Far from that, Diana. His sole idea in proposing to me is to find a fitting fellow labourer in his Indian toils." "It was madness to suggest going with him unmarried," Diana said. "You are too weak for such a task." "I must indeed give up the idea," I said. "He was shocked at my proposal to serve him as a sister." "What makes you say he does not love you?" "He has made it clear he wants a fellow labourer, not a wife. I am formed for labour, not for love." "Insupportable, unnatural, out of the question," Diana exclaimed. "He forgets the feelings and claims of little people in pursuing his large views. It is better for the insignificant to keep out of his way." St. John entered the room, composed as ever. He selected the 21st chapter of Revelation for the evening reading. His voice, usually sweet and full, took on a more solemn tone as he described the vision of the new heaven and the new earth. The words of promise and condemnation, spoken with slight alterations in tone, were directed at me. After the prayer, we took leave of him. Diana and Mary kissed him and left the room. I tendered my hand. "Thank you, Jane. I shall return from Cambridge in a fortnight. Reflect on my proposal. Remember, we are bid to work while it is day." He laid his hand on my head. His look was not that of a lover, but a guardian angel watching over a wayward soul. I felt veneration for St. John, tempted to yield to his will, but I resisted. I prayed for guidance, and in the stillness of the house a voice called out to me, "Jane! Jane! Jane!" It was the voice of Edward Fairfax Rochester, crying out in pain and woe. "I am coming!" I cried, rushing to the door, only to find darkness. The wind sighed low in the firs, and the hills sent back my question, "Where are you?" This is not deception, but the work of nature, I told myself, breaking away from St. John's grasp. I must be alone. I mounted to my chamber, prayed fervently, and took a resolve. The dim room was full of visions, and I knew I had to find Mr. Rochester. Chapter 36. Dawn of Desperation. The daylight came, a hesitant intrusion of grey light through the rain-smeared windows. I rose at dawn, each movement deliberate as if defying the murky morning. I spent an hour or two arranging my things, ensuring every item in my chamber, drawers, and wardrobe was in the order I'd want to leave them. It felt like preparing for a journey not just of distance, but of purpose. St. John's footsteps echoed in the hallway. I tensed, fearing he might knock. Instead, a slip of paper slid under the door. I picked it up and read, "You left me too suddenly last night. Had you stayed but a little longer, you would have laid your hand on the Christian's cross and the angel's crown. I shall expect your clear decision when I return this day fortnight. Meantime, watch and pray that you enter not into temptation. The spirit, I trust, is willing, but the flesh, I see, is weak. I shall pray for you hourly. Yours, St. John." "My spirit," I retorted silently, "is willing to do what is right, and my flesh, I hope, is strong enough to accomplish the will of heaven, once that will is distinctly known to me. At any rate, it shall be strong enough to search, inquire, and grope an outlet from this cloud of doubt, and find the open day of certainty." June had arrived, yet the morning was overcast and chilly. Rain drummed against the window, a relentless reminder of my internal storm. I heard the front door open and saw St. John stride through the garden, heading towards the mist-shrouded moors. He would meet the coach at Whitcross. "In a few more hours I shall follow you on that path, cousin," I thought. I too have a coach to meet at Whitcross. I too have someone to see and questions to ask before I leave forever. There were still 2 hours before breakfast. I paced my room, haunted by the memory of last night's visitation. The voice I'd heard seemed not external, but an echo within me, a tremor of the soul, like the quake that freed Paul and Silas from their prison. It was an inspiration, a clarion call that shook me awake, making my spirit tremble and exult in its newfound freedom. Ere many days, I vowed, I will know something of him whose voice seemed last night to summon me. Letters have proved useless. Personal inquiry shall replace them. At breakfast, I informed Diana and Mary of my impending journey. Their eyes widened with concern. "Alone, Jane?" they asked. "Yes, it is to see or hear news of a friend about whom I have been uneasy." They might have wondered aloud, as I had so often declared, that I had no friends but them. Yet with their innate delicacy they refrained from commenting, except that Diana, ever perceptive, asked if I was well enough to travel, noting my pallor. "Nothing ails me, save anxiety of mind," I assured her. "I hope soon to alleviate it." No further inquiries troubled me. They respected my need for discretion, granting me the freedom I would have accorded them under similar circumstances. I left Moor House at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. By 4, I stood at the foot of the Whitcross signpost, waiting for the coach to Thornfield. The solitary roads and desert hills were silent, save for the distant rumble of the approaching vehicle. It was the same coach from which I had disembarked a year ago, feeling desolate and lost. I boarded it again, now with a mission that gave me wings. The journey spanned 36 hours. I set out on a Tuesday afternoon and arrived early Thursday morning at a wayside inn. The green hedges, large fields, and low pastoral hills were a balm to my eyes, a familiar face in a sea of strangers. "How far is Thornfield Hall from here?" I asked the ostler. "Just 2 miles, ma'am, across the fields." My journey is nearly over, I thought. I disembarked, left my box with the ostler, and paid my fare. The brightening day revealed the inn's sign, the Rochester Arms. My heart leapt, only to plummet with the reminder, "Your master may be across the sea, for all you know. Even if he is at Thornfield, you dare not seek his presence." A sensible suggestion urged me to inquire at the inn about Mr. Rochester, but I couldn't bring myself to act on it. Doubt prolonged hope, and I preferred the uncertainty. I walked through the fields towards Thornfield, my heart racing with each familiar tree and meadow. At last, the woods rose before me, the rookery's dark cluster echoing with loud cawing. I hurried forward, delight mingled with dread. I would see the house from the front, where its bold battlements struck the eye. Perhaps Mr. Rochester would be at the window, or walking in the orchard. I could not tell what I would do if I saw him, God bless him, but the thought drove me on. Rounding the orchard wall, I peered from behind a stone pillar, scanning the mansion's front. The crows, silent witnesses, must have thought me timid and then reckless as I moved closer, my eyes fixed on the stately house. But I saw a blackened ruin. No need to cower behind a gatepost, no need to listen for footsteps. The lawn was trodden and waste. The portal yawned void. The house was a shell, high and fragile-looking, perforated with paneless windows. No roof, no battlements, no chimneys. All had crashed in. The silence of death and desolation hung about the place. I wandered through the shattered walls and devastated interior, gathering evidence of the calamity. Winter snows and rains had invaded, and spring had nurtured grass and weeds among the ruins. Where was the hapless owner of this wreck? I involuntarily glanced at the grey church tower and wondered if he shared its narrow marble shelter. I returned to the inn, needing answers. The host, a respectable-looking, middle-aged man, brought my breakfast. I requested him to sit down, my heart pounding with the dread of his revelations. "You know Thornfield Hall?" I managed to say. "Yes, ma'am, I lived there once." "Did you?" "Not in my time," I thought. "I was the late Mr. Rochester's butler," he added. The late. I felt the blow I had tried to evade. "The late!" I gasped. "Is he dead?" "I mean the present gentleman, Mr. Edward's father," he explained. I breathed again, assured that my Mr. Rochester was alive. Gladdening words. I could bear any disclosure now, as long as he lived. "Is Mr. Rochester living at Thornfield Hall now?" I asked, knowing the answer but delaying the direct question. "No, ma'am, Thornfield Hall is quite a ruin. It was burnt down just about harvest time." "At dead of night," I muttered. Was it known how it originated? "They guessed, ma'am. Indeed, it was ascertained. There was a lady, a lunatic, kept in the house. I have heard something of it. She was kept in close confinement. People hardly knew she existed. But last autumn she set fire to the house. She had a woman to take care of her who kept a private bottle of gin. When the woman was fast asleep, the mad lady would roam the house, doing any mischief. She set fire to the hangings of the room next to hers, then made her way to the chamber that had been the governess's, and kindled the bed. Fortunately, no one was sleeping there. The governess had run away 2 months before. Mr. Rochester was frantic, searching for her. He sent everyone away, shut himself up like a hermit, and would only leave the house at night." "What? Did he not leave England?" No, he stayed walking like a ghost about the grounds. Then Mr. Rochester was at home when the fire broke out? Yes, he got the servants out and went back to rescue his wife. She was on the roof, shouting and waving her arms. We saw him call Bertha. She gave a spring and fell. She was dead on the pavement. Dead? I echoed. Yes, and afterwards the house was burnt to the ground. Were any other lives lost? No, but Mr. Rochester was badly hurt. He's now blind and a cripple, living at Ferndean, a desolate manor house on his farm, with old John and his wife. Have you any conveyance? I asked. We have a chaise, ma'am. Get it ready instantly. If your postboy can drive me to Ferndean before dark, I'll pay both you and him twice the usual fare. Chapter 37. Echoes in the Twilight. Ferndean Manor, a relic of time, nestled deep within a forest that seemed determined to swallow it whole. The building was unremarkable in size and lacked architectural grandeur, an irony for the residence of a man like Mr. Rochester. His father had acquired the estate for its game covers, a hunting retreat in the most literal sense, abandoned and untouched, save for a few rooms maintained for seasonal visits. The estate lay dormant, like a giant asleep, waiting for something or someone to stir it to life. I approached this secluded domain on an evening draped in the melancholy of a grey sky, a biting wind, and a relentless drizzle that soaked to the bone. The final mile was a solitary journey, as I dismissed my carriage and its driver, choosing to face the looming shadows alone. The forest around Ferndean was dense and foreboding, its trees standing like silent sentinels. The iron gates, flanked by austere granite pillars, led me into a twilight realm, a world where time seemed to have paused in a perpetual state of decay. The path, overgrown and winding, seemed to stretch endlessly, the trees closing in as if to guard the secrets of the manor. Each step felt heavier than the last, the foliage so thick it threatened to consume the light, leaving me in a perpetual dusk. I questioned my direction, feeling the weight of both natural and emotional darkness pressing down on me. There was no alternative path, no break in the dense tapestry of trunks and leaves. I pressed on, compelled by a mixture of dread and determination. Finally, the trees began to thin, revealing a railing and then the house itself. Its walls were a patchwork of green decay, blending seamlessly with the surrounding woods. It was a place untouched by the light of civilization, as if the forest had laid claim to it long ago. The portal, secured by a simple latch, opened into an enclosed space devoid of flowers or garden beds, only a broad gravel walk circling a patch of grass, framed by the oppressive weight of the forest. The house, with its narrow latticed windows and pointed gables, appeared more a part of the forest than a human dwelling. Silence reigned, broken only by the pattering rain on the leaves, a sound that seemed to underscore the isolation of the place. "Can there be life here?" I whispered, the words lost in the damp air. A movement caught my eye. The narrow front door creaked open, and a figure emerged. He stood in the twilight, a man without a hat, reaching out to test the rain. It was Edward Fairfax Rochester. I stopped, breathless, watching him as if he were an apparition. Pain tempered the rapture of seeing him, a mixture of longing and restraint holding me back. His form, strong and upright, was unchanged. His hair, still raven black, framed features that had not succumbed to sorrow. Yet his countenance bore a desperation, a brooding intensity that spoke of internal battles. He reminded me of a caged eagle, fierce but fettered, his spirit wounded but not broken. Do you think I feared him in his blind ferocity? If so, you know little of me. A soft hope intertwined with my sorrow, the thought of one day pressing a kiss to that brow of rock, those lips sealed with stern resolve. But not yet. I would not approach him yet. He descended the step, his stride now cautious, hesitant. He paused, turning his blank gaze toward the sky and the encircling trees, a futile attempt to discern the world around him. His right hand reached out, searching for something solid, but found only emptiness. He relinquished the effort, folding his arms and standing still, rain dripping from his uncovered head. At that moment, John, his loyal servant, approached. "Will you take my arm, sir?" John asked, concern in his voice. "There is a heavy shower coming on. Had you not better go in?" "Let me alone," Rochester replied, the words heavy with frustration. John retreated, unaware of my presence. Rochester tried to navigate the space, but uncertainty thwarted him. He retreated to the house, the door closing behind him. I approached and knocked. John's wife, Mary, answered, her surprise evident. "Mary," I greeted her, "how are you?" She looked as if she had seen a ghost. "Is it really you, miss, come at this late hour to this lonely place?" I took her hand, calming her. "Yes, it is I." I explained briefly that I'd come to see Mr. Rochester, requesting John to fetch my trunk from the Turnpike House. I inquired about staying the night, and despite the difficulty, she assured me it was possible. Just then, the parlour bell rang. "When you go in," I instructed, "tell your master that a person wishes to speak to him, but do not give my name." "I don't think he will see you," she cautioned. "He refuses everybody." When she returned, I asked what he had said. "He asks for your name and business." I took the tray from her, insisting I deliver it myself. My heart raced as I approached the parlour door, the water spilling slightly from the glass. Mary opened the door, and I entered, the room a gloomy shadow of its former self. The fire was low, the air heavy with neglect. Rochester leaned against the mantelpiece, his old dog, Pilot, lying nearby. Pilot sprang up, almost knocking the tray from my hands. "Lie down!" I commanded softly, setting the tray on the table. Rochester turned, sensing the commotion. "Give me the water, Mary," he said. I approached, Pilot still excited. "Down, Pilot!" I said again. Rochester paused, listening. "Mary is in the kitchen," I said, handing him the glass. He drank, then put the glass down. "This is you, Mary, is it not?" "No, it is I," I replied. He reached out, his hand searching. "Who is this? Who is this?" he demanded, his voice urgent. I caught his hand, holding it in both of mine. "It is I," I said. "I have come back to you." "Jane Eyre, is it truly you?" he asked, his disbelief palpable. "Yes, it is I. I am here, in the flesh." He pulled me into an embrace, his relief mingling with disbelief. "My living Jane," he murmured, "you are here." "I am," I affirmed, "and I will not leave you again." He marvelled at my return, his joy tempered by the fear that I was but a dream. As we stood together, I felt the weight of our separation lift, replaced by a shared determination to face whatever lay ahead. In the quiet of Ferndean, amid the encroaching shadows and the whisper of rain, we found a renewed strength, a promise of a future forged together. "You understand one thing by staying with me, and I understand another," he began, his voice thick with the weight of unspoken fears. "You, perhaps, could make up your mind to be about my hand and chair, to wait on me as a kind little nurse. You have an affectionate heart and a generous spirit which prompt you to make sacrifices for those you pity, and that ought to suffice for me, no doubt. I suppose I should now entertain none but fatherly feelings for you. Do you think so? Come, tell me." I felt the tension in his words, a challenge wrapped in vulnerability. "I will think what you like, sir. I am content to be only your nurse, if you think it better." "But you cannot always be my nurse, Janet. You are young. You must marry one day." "I don't care about being married," I replied, my voice firm, defiant. "You should care, Janet. If I were what I once was, I would try to make you care, but a sightless block." His frustration was palpable, the weight of his condition pressing down upon him like an unseen hand. As he lapsed into silence, a gloom settled over him like a shroud. I, however, found a strange cheerfulness rising within me, an understanding of his true concern easing my previous embarrassment. I adopted a lighter tone, hoping to lift the fog that clung to him. It is time someone undertook to rehumanize you, I said, parting his thick, unkempt locks. For I see you are being metamorphosed into a lion or something of that sort. You have a faux air of Nebuchadnezzar in the fields about you, that is certain. Your hair reminds me of eagle's feathers. Whether your nails are grown like bird's claws or not, I have not yet noticed. On this arm I have neither hand nor nails, he said, drawing the mutilated limb from his breast and showing it to me. It is a mere stump, a ghastly sight. Don't you think so, Jane? It is a pity to see it, and a pity to see your eyes, and the scar of fire on your forehead, and the worst of it is, one is in danger of loving you too well for all this, and making too much of you. I thought you would be revolted, Jane, when you saw my arm and my cicatrized visage. Did you? Don't tell me so, lest I should say something disparaging to your judgment. Now, let me leave you an instant to make a better fire, and have the hearth swept up. Can you tell when there is a good fire? Yes, with the right eye I see a glow, a ruddy haze. And you see the candles? Very dimly. Each is a luminous cloud. Can you see me? No, my fairy, but I am only too thankful to hear and feel you. When do you take supper? I never take supper. But you shall have some tonight. I am hungry. So are you, I dare say, only you forget. Summoning Mary, I soon had the room in more cheerful order. I prepared him a comfortable repast, my spirits lifting with the task. With pleasure and ease I talked to him during supper, the conversation flowing freely. There was no harassing restraint, no need to repress my glee and vivacity. With him I was at perfect ease, knowing that I suited him. All I said or did seemed either to console or revive him. Delightful consciousness, it brought to life and light my whole nature. In his presence I thoroughly lived, and he lived in mine. Blind as he was, smiles played over his face, joy dawning on his forehead. His features softened and warmed, the lines of despair easing. After supper, he began to ask me many questions about where I had been, what I had been doing, and how I had found him out. But I gave him only partial replies. It was too late to enter into particulars that night. Besides, I wished to touch no deep thrilling chord, to open no fresh well of emotion in his heart. My sole present aim was to cheer him. Cheered, as I have said, he was, but only by fits. If a moment's silence broke the conversation, he would turn restless, touch me, then say, "Jane." "You are altogether a human being, Jane? You are certain of that?" he asked, his voice tinged with a curious hope. "I conscientiously believe so, Mr. Rochester," I replied. "Yet how, on this dark and doleful evening, could you so suddenly rise on my lone hearth?" I stretched my hand to take a glass of water from a hireling, and it was given me by you. I asked a question, expecting John's wife to answer me, and your voice spoke at my ear. "Because I had come in Mary's stead, with the tray. And there is enchantment in the very hour I am now spending with you. Who can tell what a dark, dreary, hopeless life I have dragged on for months past, doing nothing, expecting nothing, merging night in day, feeling but the sensation of cold when I let the fire go out, of hunger when I forgot to eat, and then a ceaseless sorrow and, at times, a very delirium of desire to behold my Jane again. Yes, for her restoration I longed, far more than for that of my lost sight. How can it be that Jane is with me and says she loves me? Will she not depart as suddenly as she came? Tomorrow I fear I shall find her no more. I passed my finger over his eyebrows, feeling the roughness of the scorched hair. Where is the use of doing me good in any way, beneficent spirit, when at some fatal moment you will again desert me, passing like a shadow, whither and how to me unknown, and for me remaining afterwards undiscoverable? Have you a pocket-comb about you, sir? What for, Jane? Just to comb out this shaggy black mane. I find you rather alarming when I examine you close at hand. You talk of my being a fairy, but I am sure you are more like a brownie. Am I hideous, Jane? Very, sir. You always were, you know. Humph! The wickedness has not been taken out of you, wherever you have sojourned. Yet I have been with good people, far better than you, 100 times better people, possessed of ideas and views you never entertained in your life, quite more refined and exalted. Who the deuce have you been with? If you twist in that way, you will make me pull the hair out of your head, and then I think you will cease to entertain doubts of my substantiality. Who have you been with, Jane? You shall not get it out of me tonight, sir. You must wait till tomorrow. To leave my tale half-told will, you know, be a sort of security that I shall appear at your breakfast table to finish it. By the by, I must mind not to rise on your hearth with only a glass of water then. I must bring an egg at the least, to say nothing of fried ham. You mocking changeling, fairy-born and human-bred, you make me feel as I have not felt these 12 months. If Saul could have had you for his David, the evil spirit would have been exorcised without the aid of the harp. There, sir, you are read up and made decent. Now I'll leave you. I have been travelling these last 3 days, and I believe I am tired. Good night. Just one word, Jane. Were there only ladies in the house where you have been? I laughed and made my escape, still laughing as I ran upstairs. A good idea, I thought with glee. I see I have the means of fretting him out of his melancholy for some time to come. Very early the next morning, I heard him up and astir, wandering from one room to another. As soon as Mary came down, I heard the question, "Is Miss Eyre here?" Then, "Which room did you put her into? Was it dry? Is she up? Go and ask if she wants anything, and when she will come down." His concern, his need for reassurance, painted a picture of his loneliness. He was a man adrift, clinging to the hope that I, his anchor, would not vanish with the morning light. And I, in turn, felt a renewed sense of purpose, a determination to banish the shadows from Ferndean and from his heart. I descended, lured by the faint promise of breakfast. Entering the room with the delicacy of a shadow, I observed him before he noticed my presence. The sight was heart-wrenching, a man of such vigour, now a prisoner to frailty. He sat in his chair, immobile but not serene, his countenance a canvas of sadness and expectation. His face, once a beacon of strength, now resembled a snuffed-out lamp, awaiting another spark to reignite it. The power to kindle that light was no longer his own. It lay in the hands of another. I had intended to greet him with cheer, but his helplessness pierced my heart. Still, I mustered the brightest vivacity I could. "It's a bright, sunny morning, sir," I said. "The rain has passed, leaving a tender shine in its wake. A walk soon, perhaps." A flicker of warmth lit his features. "Oh, you are indeed there, my skylark. Come to me. You are not gone, not vanished. I heard one of your kind an hour ago singing high over the wood, but its song had no music for me, any more than the rising sun had rays. All the melody on earth is concentrated in my Jane's tongue to my ear. I am glad it is not naturally a silent one. All the sunshine I can feel is in her presence." Tears stung my eyes at his confession of dependence, as if a royal eagle, shackled, begged a sparrow for sustenance. Yet I swallowed my sorrow and busied myself with preparing breakfast. The morning was spent in the open air. I led him from the damp, wild wood to fields, bright with renewed life. I described the vibrant greens, the refreshed flowers, the sparkling blue sky. I found a seat for him on a dry tree stump in a hidden lovely spot, and did not resist when he placed me on his knee. Why should I when we were happier together? Pilate lay beside us, the world silent. Suddenly he clasped me tightly and spoke. "Cruel, cruel deserter! Oh, Jane! What did I feel when I discovered you had fled from Thornfield, and when I could nowhere find you, and, after examining your apartment, ascertained that you had taken no money, nor anything which could serve as an equivalent. A pearl necklace I had given you lay untouched in its little casket. Your trunks were left corded and locked, as they had been prepared for the bridal tour. What could my darling do, I asked, left destitute and penniless? And what did she do? Let me hear now. Thus urged, I began recounting my past year. I softened the details of my wandering and starvation, knowing the full truth would cause him unnecessary pain. Even the little I did share wounded his loyal heart more than I intended. He insisted I should not have left him without means. I should have confided in him. He would never have forced me to be his mistress. Despite his seeming violence and despair, he loved me too deeply to become my tyrant. He would have given me half his fortune without demanding a kiss in return, rather than let me face the world friendless. He was certain I had endured more than I admitted. Well, whatever my sufferings had been, they were very short, I replied. I then narrated my reception at Moor House, my role as schoolmistress, and my discovery of relations. St. John River's name appeared frequently in my tale. When I finished, he immediately seized upon that name. This St. John, then, is your cousin? Yes. You have spoken of him often. Do you like him? He was a very good man, sir. I could not help liking him. A good man? Does that mean a respectable, well-conducted man of 50, or what does it mean? St. John was only 29, sir. June encore, as the French say. Is he a person of low stature, phlegmatic and plain? A person whose goodness consists rather in his guiltlessness of vice than in his prowess in virtue? He is untiringly active. Great and exalted deeds are what he lives to perform. But his brain, that is probably rather soft. He means well, but you shrug your shoulders to hear him talk. He talks little, sir. What he does say is ever to the point. His brain is first-rate, I should think. Not impressible, but vigorous. Is he an able man, then? Truly able. A thoroughly educated man. St. John is an accomplished and profound scholar. His manners, I think you said, are not to your taste, priggish and parsonic. I never mentioned his manners, but unless I had a very bad taste, they must suit it. They are polished, calm, and gentlemanlike. His appearance, I forget what description you gave of his appearance, a sort of raw curate, half strangled with his white neckcloth, and stilted up on his thick-soled high-lows, eh? St. John dresses well. He's a handsome man, tall, fair, with blue eyes, and a Grecian profile. Aside, damn him! To me. Did you like him, Jane? Yes, Mr. Rochester, I liked him, but you asked me that before. I perceived, of course, the drift of my interlocutor. Jealousy had seized him. It stung him, but the sting was a respite from melancholy. I did not immediately soothe him. Perhaps you would rather not sit any longer on my knee, Miss Eyre, was his next, somewhat unexpected remark. Why not, Mr. Rochester? The picture you have just drawn is suggestive of a rather too overwhelming contrast. Your words have delineated a graceful Apollo, tall, fair, blue-eyed, with a Grecian profile. Your eyes dwell on a Vulcan, a real blacksmith, brown, broad-shouldered, and blind and lame to boot. I never thought of it before, but you certainly are rather like Vulcan, sir. Well, you can leave me, ma'am, but before you go, and he grasped me more firmly than ever, you will be pleased to answer me a question or two. He paused. What questions, Mr. Rochester? Then followed a cross-examination. St. John made you schoolmistress of Morton before he knew you were his cousin? Yes. You would often see him? He would visit the school sometimes? Daily. He would approve of your plans, Jane. I know they would be clever, for you are a talented creature. He approved of them, yes. He would discover many things in you he could not have expected to find. Some of your accomplishments are not ordinary. I don't know about that. You had a little cottage near the school, you say. Did he ever come there to see you? Now and then. Of an evening? Once or twice. A pause. How long did you reside with him and his sisters after the cousinship was discovered? 5 months. Did Rivers spend much time with the ladies of his family? Yes, the back parlour was both his study and ours. He sat near the window and we by the table. Did he study much? A good deal. What? Hindostani? And what did you do meantime? I learned German, at first. Did he teach you? He did not understand German. Did he teach you nothing? A little Hindustani. Rivers taught you Hindustani? Yes, sir. And his sisters also? No. Only you? Only me. Did you ask to learn? No. He wished to teach you? Yes. A second pause. Why did he wish it? Of what use could Hindustani be to you? He intended me to go with him to India. Ah, here I reach the root of the matter. He wanted you to marry him. He asked me to marry him. That is a fiction, an impudent invention to vex me. I beg your pardon. It is the literal truth. He asked me more than once, and was as persistent as ever you could be. Miss Eyre, I repeat it, you can leave me. How often am I to say the same thing? Why do you remain perched on my knee when I have given you notice to quit? Because I am comfortable there. No, Jane, you are not comfortable there because your heart is not with me, is with this cousin, this St. John. Oh, till this moment I thought my little Jane was all mine. I had a belief she loved me even when she left me. That was an atom of sweet in much bitter. Long as we have been parted, hot tears as I have wept over our separation, I never thought that while I was mourning her, she was loving another. But it is useless grieving. Jane, leave me. Go and marry Rivers. Shake me off then, sir. Push me away, for I'll not leave you of my own accord. Jane, I ever like your tone of voice. It still renews hope. It sounds so truthful. When I hear it, it carries me back a year. I forget that you have formed a new tie. But I am not a fool. Go. Where must I go, sir? Your own way, with the husband you have chosen. Who is that? You know, this St. John Rivers. He is not my husband, nor ever will be. He does not love me. I do not love him. He loves as he can love, and that is not as you love, a beautiful young lady called Rosamond. He wanted to marry me only because he thought I should make a suitable missionary's wife, which she would not have done. He is good and great, but severe, and for me, cold as an iceberg. He is not like you, sir. I am not happy at his side, nor near him, nor with him. He has no indulgence for me, no fondness. He sees nothing attractive in me, not even youth, only a few useful mental points. Then I must leave you, sir, to go to him. I shuddered involuntarily and clung instinctively closer to my blind but beloved master. He smiled. What, Jane? Is this true? Is such really the state of matters between you and Rivers? Absolutely, sir. Oh, you need not be jealous. I wanted to tease you a little to make you less sad. I thought anger would be better than grief. But if you wish me to love you, could you but see how much I do love you, you would be proud and content. All my heart is yours, sir. It belongs to you, and with you it would remain, were fate to exile the rest of me from your presence forever. Again, as he kissed me, painful thoughts darkened his aspect. My seared vision, my crippled strength, he murmured regretfully. I caressed, in order to soothe him. I knew of what he was thinking and wanted to speak for him, but dared not. As he turned aside his face for a minute, I saw a tear slide from under the sealed eyelid and trickle down the manly cheek. My heart swelled. I am no better than the old lightning-struck chestnut tree in Thornfield Orchard, he remarked ere long. And what right would that ruin have to bid a budding woodbine cover its decay with freshness? You are no ruin, sir, no lightning-struck tree. You are green and vigorous. Plants will grow about your roots, whether you ask them or not, because they take delight in your bountiful shadow. And as they grow, they will lean towards you and wind round you because your strength offers them so safe a prop. Again he smiled. I gave him comfort. You speak of friends, Jane? He asked. Yes, of friends, I answered rather hesitatingly, for I knew I meant more than friends, but could not tell what other word to employ. He helped me. Ah, Jane, but I want a wife. Do you, sir? Yes, is it news to you? Of course, you said nothing about it before. Is it unwelcome news? That depends on circumstances, sir, on your choice. Which you shall make for me, Jane. I will abide by your decision. Choose then, sir, her who loves you best. I will at least choose her I love best. Jane, will you marry me? Yes, sir. A poor blind man whom you will have to lead about by the hand? Yes, sir. A crippled man 20 years older than you, whom you will have to wait on? Yes, sir. Truly, Jane? Most truly, sir. Oh, my darling, God bless you and reward you. Mr. Rochester, if ever I did a good deed in my life, if ever I thought a good thought, if ever I prayed a sincere and blameless prayer, if ever I wished a righteous wish, I am rewarded now. To be your wife is, for me, to be as happy as I can be on earth. Because you delight in sacrifice. Sacrifice? What do I sacrifice? Famine for food, expectation for content. To be privileged to put my arms round what I value, to press my lips to what I love, to repose on what I trust. Is that to make a sacrifice? If so, then certainly I delight in sacrifice. And to bear with my infirmities, Jane, to overlook my deficiencies. Which are none, sir, to me. I love you better now when I can really be useful to you than I did in your state of proud independence, when you disdained every part but that of the giver and protector. Hitherto I have hated to be helped, to be led. Henceforth I feel I shall hate it no more. I did not like to put my hand into a hireling's, but it is pleasant to feel it circled by Jane's little fingers. I preferred utter loneliness to the constant attendance of servants, but Jane's soft ministry will be a perpetual joy. Jane suits me. Do I suit her? To the finest fibre of my nature, sir. The case being so, we have nothing in the world to wait for. We must be married instantly. He looked and spoke with eagerness. His old impetuosity was rising. We must become one flesh without any delay, Jane. There is but the licence to get, then we marry. Mr. Rochester, I have just discovered the sun is far declined from its meridian, and Pilot is actually gone home to his dinner. Let me look at your watch. Fasten it into your girdle, Janet, and keep it henceforward. I have no use for it. It is nearly 4 o'clock in the afternoon, sir. Don't you feel hungry? The 3rd day from this must be our wedding day, Jane. Never mind fine clothes and jewels now, all that is not worth a fillip. The sun has dried up all the raindrops, sir. The breeze is still. It is quite hot. Do you know, Jane, I have your little pearl necklace at this moment fastened round my bronze scrag under my cravat. I have worn it since the day I lost my only treasure as a memento of her. We will go home through the wood. That will be the shadiest way. He pursued his own thoughts without heeding me. Jane, you think me, I dare say, an irreligious dog. But my heart swells with gratitude to the beneficent God of this earth just now. He sees not as man sees, but far clearer, judges not as man judges, but far more wisely. I did wrong. I would have sullied my innocent flower, breathed guilt on its purity. The Omnipotent snatched it from me. I, in my stiff-necked rebellion, almost cursed the dispensation. Instead of bending to the decree, I defied it. Divine justice pursued its course. Disasters came thick on me. I was forced to pass through the valley of the shadow of death. His chastisements are mighty, and one smote me which has humbled me forever. You know I was proud of my strength. But what is it now, when I must give it over to foreign guidance as a child does its weakness? Of late, Jane, only of late, I began to see and acknowledge the hand of God in my doom. I began to experience remorse, repentance, the wish for reconcilement to my Maker. I began sometimes to pray. Very brief prayers they were, but very sincere. Some days since, nay, I can number them, 4, it was last Monday night, a singular mood came over me, one in which grief replaced frenzy, sorrow, sullenness. I had long had the impression that since I could nowhere find you, you must be dead. Late that night, perhaps it might be between 11 and 12 o'clock, ere I retired to my dreary rest, I supplicated God that, if it seemed good to him, I might soon be taken from this life and admitted to that world to come, where there was still hope of rejoining Jane. I was in my own room and sitting by the window, which was open. It soothed me to feel the balmy night air, though I could see no stars and only by a vague luminous haze knew the presence of a moon. I longed for thee, Janet. Oh, I longed for thee both with soul and flesh. I asked of God, at once in anguish and humility, if I had not been long enough desolate, afflicted, tormented, and might not soon taste bliss and peace once more. That I merited all I endured, I acknowledged. That I could scarcely endure more, I pleaded. And the alpha and omega of my heart's wishes broke involuntarily from my lips in the words, Jane, Jane, Jane. Did you speak these words aloud? I did, Jane. If any listener had heard me, he would have thought me mad. I pronounced them with such frantic energy. And it was last Monday night, somewhere near midnight? Yes, but the time is of no consequence. What followed is the strange point. You will think me superstitious. Some superstition I have in my blood, and always had. Nevertheless, this is true. True at least it is that I heard what I now relate. As I exclaimed, Jane, 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 a voice, I cannot tell whence the voice came, but I know whose voice it was, replied, I am coming, wait for me. And a moment after, went whispering on the wind the words, Where are you? I'll tell you if I can the idea, the picture these words open to my mind, yet it is difficult to express what I want to express. Ferndean is buried, as you see, in a heavy wood where sound falls dull and dies unreverberating. Where are you? Seemed spoken amongst mountains, for I heard a hill-sent echo repeat the words. Cooler and fresher at the moment the gale seemed to visit my brow. I could have deemed that in some wild, lone scene, I and Jane were meeting. In spirit, I believe we must have met. You no doubt were, at that hour, in unconscious sleep, Jane. Perhaps your soul wandered from its cell to comfort mine, for those were your accents. As certain as I live, they were yours. Reader, it was on Monday night, near midnight, that I too had received the mysterious summons. Those were the very words by which I replied to it. I listened to Mr. Rochester's narrative, but made no disclosure in return. The coincidence struck me as too awful and inexplicable to be communicated or discussed. If I told anything, my tale would be such as must necessarily make a profound impression on the mind of my hearer, and that mind, yet from its sufferings too prone to gloom, needed not the deeper shade of the supernatural. I kept these things then, and pondered them in my heart. You cannot now wonder, continued my master, that when you rose upon me so unexpectedly last night, I had difficulty in believing you any other than a mere voice and vision, something that would melt to silence and annihilation, as the midnight whisper and mountain echo had melted before. Now, I thank God, I know it to be otherwise. Yes, I thank God. He put me off his knee, rose, and reverently lifting his hat from his brow and bending his sightless eyes to the earth, he stood in mute devotion. Only the last words of the worship were audible. I thank my Maker that, in the midst of judgment, he has remembered mercy. I humbly entreat my Redeemer to give me strength to lead henceforth a purer life than I have done hitherto. Then he stretched his hand out to be led. I took that dear hand, held it a moment to my lips, then let it pass round my shoulder. Being so much lower of stature than he, I served both for his prop and guide. We entered the wood and wended homeward. Chapter 38, Threads of Destiny. Reader, I married him. A quiet, understated wedding, just he and I, the parson and clerk, like a whispered secret shared under a shadowed sky. When we returned from the church, I slipped into the manor house kitchen, where Mary was roasting a pair of chickens, and John was polishing knives. Mary, I have been married to Mr. Rochester this morning, I said. Mary, to her credit, didn't shriek or faint. She merely paused, the ladle frozen mid-air as if time itself held its breath. John's knives stilled, their reflection capturing the moment's gravity. Have you, miss? Well, for sure, she said, finally resuming her basting, her tone as steady as the ticking of a clock. I saw you go out with the master, but didn't know you were gone to church to be wed, she added, her voice as calm as the steady flame under her roast. John grinned from ear to ear, a knowing smile that spoke of long-held suspicions confirmed. "I told Mary it would be so," he said. "I knew what Mr. Edward would do, and I was certain he wouldn't wait long neither. He's done right. For aught I know, I wish you joy, miss." And he politely tugged his forelock. "Thank you, John. Mr. Rochester told me to give you and Mary this." I handed him a £5 note, a token of our shared new beginning. As I left the kitchen, I caught their murmured reassurances. "She'll do better for him than any grand lady. And she's good-natured and in his eyes, fair beautiful." I wrote to Moor House and to Cambridge, explaining my actions. Diana and Mary approved wholeheartedly. Diana declared she would visit as soon as we were over the honeymoon. "She'd better not wait till then, Jane," Mr. Rochester said, his tone light yet firm. "Our honeymoon will last a lifetime. Its beams will only fade over your grave or mine." St. John's response was a silence that spoke volumes. He never replied directly, but 6 months later, a letter arrived, serious, kind, devoid of mention of my marriage. His correspondence has remained regular but sparse. His letters a blend of hope and austere admonition. And little Adele, reader, I have not forgotten her. Upon visiting her at the strict, severe school Mr. Rochester had chosen, I found her pale and unhappy. I took her home, intending to be her governess again. However, my new responsibilities to my husband made this impractical. I found a more nurturing school nearby, ensuring she never lacked comfort. She thrived, her education smoothing her French edges, and grew into a pleasant, obliging companion. My tale draws to a close. 10 years into my marriage, I know what it is to live for and with what I love most. I am supremely blessed, beyond words, because my husband and I are intertwined, closer than any two people could be. We are each other's world, our hearts beating in unison, our lives a seamless blend of solitude and companionship. We talk endlessly, our conversations an extension of our thoughts. Our confidence is mutual, our characters perfectly aligned. For the first 2 years of our union, Mr. Rochester remained blind. This brought us even closer, for I became his vision, his right hand. He saw the world through my eyes, and I never tired of describing to him the landscapes, the weather, the essence of life that light could no longer stamp on his eye. There was a joy in my service to him, a fulfillment in our interdependence that transcended sadness. One morning, as I was writing a letter to his dictation, he bent over me and asked, "Jane, do you have a glittering ornament around your neck?" "Yes," I answered, touching the gold watch chain. "And are you wearing a pale blue dress?" "Yes," I confirmed. He then shared that the obscurity clouding one eye seemed to be lifting. We went to London for the advice of an eminent oculist. Eventually, he regained partial sight in one eye. He could now see the sky, the earth, and most importantly, the face of his firstborn, who inherited his brilliant black eyes. In that moment, he acknowledged that divine judgment had indeed been tempered with mercy. Edward and I are happy, and those we love are happy too. Diana and Mary Rivers are both married. Diana's husband is a naval captain, gallant and good. Mary's husband, a clergyman and college friend of St. John's S., is equally worthy. Both men adore their wives. St. John Rivers, steadfast and indomitable, left for India. He continues his path, resolute and devoted, clearing the way for others, battling prejudice and creed with the zeal of a warrior. His letters, though rare, are filled with hope and divine joy, anticipating his ultimate reward. His mind is unclouded, his heart undaunted, his faith steadfast. "My master has forewarned me," he writes. "Daily he announces more distinctly, 'Surely I come quickly,' and hourly I more eagerly respond, 'Amen, even so come, Lord Jesus.'" Thus, reader, my story ends. The threads of our lives woven together in a tapestry of love, faith, and unyielding hope stretch onward into the unknown, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit.
Thank you for listening to Jane Eyre Reimagined. We hope you have enjoyed this audiobook. If so, please like, share, or comment. By doing so, you can help others find this channel, and it will help us grow our community. Also, let us know in the comments what classic books you would like to hear reimagined through the lens of your favorite modern author. And we will try to make it happen soon.